Hello and welcome to episode 17 of our Bobcast, the weekly coaches show where we chat with current in-season head coaches. And this week we begin with men's and women's swimming coach Justin Anderson. And Justin, a pair of wins for both the men's and women's team, sweeping Bethany and Salem University. The highlight of the day may have to be the men's and women's 400 freestyle relay teams. School records in both. Did you go into that meet expecting that result? And how did that all play out?
I knew we'd definitely be really close in those relays to the records. You add up those four people's times. For the men, we were right at the record, but a little bit slower than it. On the women's side, I thought they'd be about a second or two under, but they got 4 seconds under, so that was really nice to see them swimming so fast. And for the men to be 6 seconds under was just incredible, especially earlier this year. I think we were like a second over it at our last meet of the first semester doing that. So,
how aware are those swimmers of those school record times?
they've been really aware of it, especially since we bought the record board with our master swimming donations a couple years ago. Now that they can see them every meet we have, they can look up and say, okay, this is where it's at. This is what each of us is going to have to split on the relays to get it. And definitely heading into those relays, I reminded them, you guys are going to be right there. You got to push for it.
And with a meet with Bethany and Salem, there were several times where it was Frostburg really competing against yourself, where you were filling other lanes and having different swimmers swim exhibitions. How do you keep the swimmers' focus and intensity up, even if there are no competitors from other schools per se racing?
Yeah, that's a mindset we try to establish all year long, is that you're racing yourself every time you race, besides racing the competitors around you. So we're trying to go best unrested times and as fast as we can, regardless of what is going on in the lane next to us.
When you see other things that go on in this meet, Connor Giuffrida, 3 U.S. Paralympic times, tons of wins up and down. Giuffrida is a first year, and you also have several others. I'm thinking of Giuseppetti, Holloway, Conklin, Peterson, Walton. All of them contributed in some way or another on this meet on Saturday. And then you've got others on the women's side too. What do you make of your first-year swimmers now in their second semester?
Yeah, I think a lot of them have really adjusted to the type of training that we're doing, and they see that they can swim fast when they're broken down and tired. And they've adjusted, and I think their performances these first couple meets back from our January training have gone really well. And they're swimming better now than they were, the first few meets of the season when they started out here in September.
And they were getting it done. Just about all of them had an individual win on Saturday. Connor and the U.S. Paralympic records. As a first year, that has to be a good sign. He set the record in the 100 fly, 400 free, and 800 free. And reading some of his quotes and some of your quotes from the World Para Swimming Championships, I get the vibe that he wants to be a world champion, and you want to help him get there. How does he get to that point?
It's going to be a lot of hard work, and I mean that's the biggest thing. Is Connor, I think, started scratching the surface of what he was capable of doing in high school with his club team, and I think he's done so much more in intensity here in terms of total yardage that we swim, what he's doing in the weight room, and just picking up that intensity on a daily basis. We talk about doing things incrementally, and if you start improving things by even a half a percentage point on a weekly basis, that adds up as we go along. And it isn't going to be an overnight process. So the next World Championships is going to be 2 years from now, and hopefully he's positioned himself to compete even higher than he did this past year. And then I know he's got Tokyo as a goal, so that's another thing he's going to be chasing over these next 4 years.
It was exciting to see those times in Paralympic records. We can't have a conversation without talking about Nietzsche and March, both of them taking care of business in their individual events. How is their progress, training, fitness, and times right now in terms of the bigger picture of getting to nationals? Where are they in that goal?
Yeah, I think they're right on pace. I mean, it's always hard year to year to tell, where we are, because the training does differ from season to season. And we've definitely pushed harder in the pool and the weight room than we ever have before. So for how tired and broken down they are, they're swimming right at where they've been in the past seasons, right at where they were before F&M, with some couple weeks to go before we start our taper and rest. So I think they're in a really strong spot. And, unfortunately, Nationals isn't completely in their control. It's not like there's a standard they can hit and they know they're going. So a lot of it's going to be dependent on what the other swimmers and the other conferences do around the country.
And everyone tapers and posts their very fastest times at the end of the year, pretty much on the same day,
yeah,
more or less.
One of the nice things we'll have is our conference championship weekend is actually the last conference weekend. So we finish on Sunday, and the cutoff for times being submitted is Monday at noon the next day. So we'll have an idea heading into that meet. I would guess 75% of the conferences will have had their conference meet.
Bethany and Salem both started theirs on the 14th.
Yeah, so they'll be wrapping up. We'll be able to see where other people in the country are and have a rough idea of what it's going to take. I know on the men's side, it's looking like they're going to take between 14 and 16 men per event. On the women's side, it's looking like it's going to be 24 to 26 per event. And right now, Christian's 11th and Macy's 19th. So they're both under that cutoff right now. But we do have some conferences that didn't do mid-season taper meets. The NESCAC's one of them, and they've got some of the best swimmers in the country.
Sure.
So it's just going to be a matter of time, see what they post and where they stand after that.
This weekend coming up, we have back-to-back, Friday at E-Town, Saturday hosting Marymount. When the schedule comes together, when it comes to back-to-back meet days, what is the challenge with that? What is the benefit for swimmers? Do you like that challenge for your team?
Yeah, it's definitely the challenge is that they're going to be turning around on short rest and having to go from one meet to the other, racing fast 2 days in a row. As a coach, I actually do that strategically because I want them to be ready for conference championships when, they're going to start out racing Thursday night, then they're racing Friday morning, Friday night, Saturday morning, Saturday night, Sunday morning. So if you can't do it 2 days in a row, it's going to be pretty tough to do it 4 days in a row when we get to champs. So this is kind of our dress rehearsal of, okay, let's get ready to see what it's going to be like to have to get up day after day.
And you said to me after the meet, you still want to see fast times. When is the process beginning for that conference championship workload decline and getting ready for that?
Yeah, if you think of it like a graph, we're working up the mountain right now, and pretty much after this weekend's meet, we'll start gradually going downhill. And it's just going to be slow going that first week, and then you're going to see a real steep drop in what we do in terms of yardage and what we're doing in the weight room until we cut out the weight room altogether the last week.
And when we talked before break, you were really happy with where your team was and a fitness and time level. It was as good as you've seen here. After break, you've had a couple of meets now. Last weekend, York. This weekend, home with Bethany and Salem. Where would you say the progress is at this point in the season?
Yeah, we're definitely ahead of where we've ever been before this time of year. So I'm excited to see what they can do. And, I hopefully that flu bug, knock on wood, that's going around stays away from us and everybody stays healthy these last few weeks and they do what they know how to do at champs.
Well, we're looking forward to our last swim meet of the season here at the Bobcat and Auditorium on Saturday. Justin Anderson, thanks for joining us in the Bobcast.
Thanks.
Next on the Bobcast, we have men's basketball head coach Webb Hatch in men's basketball. An excellent week, a home win over number 7 ranked York, 95-85, and a win at St. Mary's College, 76-72. The Bobcats now 7-5 in conference play. Already more wins than last season, in 5th place, up 2 games on 6th place. So Bobcats in good shape right now. A win over number 7, nationally ranked York College, 16-1 entering Bobcat Arena. Coach, back in December, you told me that York probably was the best team in the conference. How did you pull it off?
And I still think they're the best team in the league. We shot the ball really well, 54% overall from the floor, 59% on threes, 61% on free throws. And, good shooting cures a lot of ills. We've had some games this year where we haven't shot the ball well, and we've been in the games, and if we could have just shot a little bit better, we probably, could have won those ball games. It's amazing. When you don't shoot well, you really need to play good defense to get stops, but sometimes body language and people get down on themselves because the ball's not going in and they don't defend as well, and then when they make shots, all of a sudden their body language is better and they want to guard people. And because we made shots, we defended pretty well. We had some things that we did against their 2 big guys, Myers and Reich, and we doubled them quite a bit, and I think they were averaging about 36 points a game.
Between them, yes.
Between them, we held them to, 24, 25.
Mm-hmm.
So, the game plan as far as defense worked. We talked to our guys about up at their place, I think we had shot 32 threes and made 8 maybe or 4, I forget which.
Goss made 4 of them back at their place. Everyone else shot very poorly.
Okay, and we said if we shot 32 threes against them, on Wednesday night, we lose. and we wanted our threes to be inside out, which simply means get the ball into the paint first and then kick it out for a three. And that, I feel like you're kind of anticipating the three may be taken then, so then you start positioning to possibly get a rebound. So we only took 22 threes and, ironically made 13. So a lot of things fell in place. We played good defense. We rebounded pretty well. We shot the ball well. A couple of their guys didn't play as well as they normally play offensively, and maybe we had something to do with that. So it's a real good win, and we had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 kids in double figures. So it was a great win for us. I still think they're the best team in the league, and they've got 2 losses. They had lost a close one the week preview at Murray, Washington, I think 59-57.
Yes.
So, and they bounced back and won this Saturday. So they're still the team to beat, and I don't expect that they're going to, lose a ton of games over the last 3 weeks.
Lawrence Pettis, you mentioned this after the game too. The Saturday previously, scoreless in 24 minutes off the bench against Wesley. And he turns around, a week and a half later, strings together 3 straight 20-point games. You've said this before where if we play well, we're a pretty good team or we're pretty hard to beat. When he plays well specifically, what does that do for your team? And 5 for 6 from 3, 8 assists, that might be Lawrence Pettis' finest performance of the year.
Well, it gives you another scorer, obviously. And I've always liked, over my career, point guards who can score. I want point guards who are unselfish, who get their teammates involved. But point guards who can score give you a real good offensive weapon, because if people back off of them anticipating passes, then they've got the ability to hit the jumper or hit the three or maybe drive it to the basket. So he had started most of our games, and he was in a little bit of a shooting slump, and so we just decided to I talked to him. I said, I'm just going to bring you off the bench. I'm not mad at you, but maybe that'll help you get focused. Maybe you'll be a spark for us, because he's by far our quickest player. And, I'm sure he'd rather start, but, he was very coachable about it, and he understood. And shooting slumps come and go. Not to get ahead of ourselves, he didn't shoot the ball particularly well at St. Mary's on Saturday, but he had a great floor game. He did a lot of other good things for us. So you can't predict that stuff. But, we ran quite a few plays for him on Wednesday night because he was shooting the ball so well. So we said, let's go with him and see if he can make a play. And if he's open, let him shoot the ball. So that's his most productive game, obviously, of the year as far as points.
Yeah. And I want to touch on one more thing with the York College game. Edwin Cole fouls out with 10 minutes left to go. And all year long, we've been looking for more out of Darren Campbell and Dalton Goss. I thought this team might have been in some trouble losing Edwin Cole for those final 10 minutes. What did you make of Campbell and Goss filling in and really stepping up and making big plays down the stretch in the final 10 minutes of regulation?
I mean, they did a good job. Darren's been getting a lot of playing time. Dalton and Darren, the first third, maybe first half of the season, were almost getting 50-50 in playing time. They play the 5 spot for us, but they're not traditional post players. They're big forwards, because they can shoot the three. Darren's gotten a little more playing time than Dalton in the last couple weeks. But, Dalton's an excellent free throw shooter. So you like having him on the floor late in ball games for foul situations. He's very, very long. He can influence some things defensively a little bit if he's on a guy 6'3", because Dalton's 6'4", 6'5", huge wingspan. He can run the floor. He can obviously shoot the three. Ed's a key player for us. He's averaging almost a double-double. And if we don't have him on the floor, our inside game suffers a little bit. The other guy that helped us out was Chris Costin, who's 6'2", maybe 6'3", but plays a lot bigger than that. Very, very good rebounder, a little bit of a shot blocker, very, very athletic. So between the three of them, that's who we were going to turn to when we lost Edwin, and they all stepped up and made contributions in their own way.
All three guys seniors as well. I do want to shift gears and take a look at the St. Mary's game. The first time around here, a 20-point lead at halftime. St. Mary's just a little bit better. In the second half, they came away with the win. Was there more juice to this game because of what happened the first time around, and how did your team respond?
Yeah, I mean, once you lose games, you sulk about it for 24, 48 hours, and then you move on. And then when you have to play them again, you begin to think about that loss again. And, we were afraid that loss might eventually come back and really bite us in the butt as far as making the playoffs, or between finishing, 5th and 6th or 4th and 3rd or whatever. If we had our record with St. Mary's over a number of years, what's been interesting about games with them is we frequently had large leads against them and lost them and wound up losing the game sometimes. And I think the same thing has also happened. They've had some big leads against us, which they've lost, and we've come back and, maybe won one or two of them. I don't know. But it was a huge game. We hadn't won a Saturday game in January, since we'd come back. So in 18, we were 4-0 on Wednesdays and 0-3 on Saturdays. So that was a monkey we were trying to get off our back. And the other thing is, you felt like the game in December when they beat us, and to their credit, they came back. But I think we led for like 38 minutes. So we really felt like we let it get away. So we were determined to not let that happen. And in Doug, it almost didn't happen again. We were up 10 at halftime, and they eventually took the lead.
2:45 left to play.
Okay.
They take a 1-point lead.
I knew it was around the 3-minute mark, but we responded. There was a timeout sometime during that last 2.5 minutes, and you love this when kids say this. But Tyler Michael, who's a senior captain, he made the statement, "We are not going to lose this game." And you love it when kids say something like that.
Yeah.
And then they go out and do it. And he hit a couple of huge shots for us late that, allowed us to walk out of there with a win.
Late in that game, Edwin Cole scores and was fouled. Michael, 2 straight possessions where he scores. It feels like you've been in that situation plenty of times this season. Do they sort of know the drill? What's it like when you come to that timeout inevitably late in the game? Where are you looking to go?
Well, I think there's, as the season's progressed, we've got more people who can step up.
Yeah.
You like to have the ball in Lawrence's hands because he's probably our best decision maker. He can execute a pick and roll, and he can get to the basket, and he can dump it off. And he has an uncanny ability, to get the ball up on the rim.
Yes.
I mean, we've had 2 games where he's gotten either the last shot or a shot very, very, very late in the ball game that laid on the rim and fell out. Montclair State and CNU, I believe.
And he made those shots against Washington.
Right. He made one in regulation and one in the overtime at Washington College. So he's a player that we like to go to. Tyler is a big-time clutch scorer. I mean, he can get to the rim, and he's got that wonderful bank shot that he likes to shoot off the dribble. Daniel Alexander can make big shots. And Darren Campbell is a very clutch shooter. A 12 or 15-foot baseline jumper he's pretty effective on, and he's got 3-point range. I mean, he had a 3 at CNU to send it into overtime. He hit some big shots against York the other night. So, and then Ed is real good in pick and roll. So by no means are we, unstoppable in those situations, but we're fortunate enough as the season progresses, we've got 4 or 5 guys who have the potential to score. And, you set up a play, and here's the first option, here's the second option, but we got other options if those things don't come through.
And this finally was a different style of a win, York and St. Mary's. You didn't take as many shots, 61 for the team, which is on the lower end that you've had this year. You didn't have a big scoring distribution. Tyler Michael carried the load. What's the benefit of winning in different ways, and how did you win this one?
I guess the benefit is that, the kids know that no matter what the other team does defensively or how we play, we've got a shot at it. We had a couple guys that didn't shoot the ball particularly well Saturday, but we still wound up shooting almost 53% for the game. Tyler, what was he? 14 for 19. So he really kind of carried us. But Edwin was almost a double-double. Daniel had 14 and 8. Darren Campbell had 6 and 6. So we can win in a lot of different ways. We want to get 70 to 75 shots every night.
Yes.
And so but we're not pressing as much as we had earlier. We played a lot of half-court man and a lot of 2-1-2 matchup. We only showed our 2-2-1 press about maybe 5 possessions. So that slows the game down a little bit, and you have less turnovers. I mean, we only had 1 turnover at halftime. I don't think I've ever coached a team here that only had 1 turnover at halftime. And we wound up with 7 for the game, and they only had 8, and they're averaging about 17 turnovers a game. So they did a real good job of taking care of the ball. Or we had 8 and they had 7, I guess. But we didn't get up and pressure them full court like we have been doing in some other games.
Huh. Well, finally, this week, Penn State-Harrisburg is the Wednesday game. I know they're only 2-10, but they've added a 6'8" player, Chris Bing, to their lineup. He's been effective for them this season. What's the approach for Wednesday and in general against teams playing them a second time?
I haven't even started watching tape on them yet, and we'll do that today and tomorrow. Coach Friday does a great job there. We haven't had much success there. Maybe we may not have ever won there, or maybe only won there once in the 5 or 6 years they've been in the league. So we'll have to play well. They're hoping that in the last 6 games that they're going to win 4 or 5 and get back in the playoff picture.
8-10 was good enough to do it last season, so they'll have to be very good.
I'm sure that's what they're hoping to do. And the game that we had here was a close ball game. Mm-hmm. We by no means blew them out. We lost to them twice the previous year. I think we'd lost to them 4 straight times. So we'll have to play well, and we can't go up there overconfident. But the good thing is we do know we have defeated them, and we know if we play well, we're capable of beating them. So we'll see.
We'll see. Well, Webb Hatch, thank you for joining us this week on the Bobcast.
You're welcome.
Next on the Bobcast, we have women's basketball head coach Carrie Saunders. Women's basketball splitting 2 games last week, a loss to York shorthanded, and then a win over St. Mary's 68-51. Women's basketball now 5-7 in conference play. That's tied for 6th with Southern Virginia. And, Coach, looking at this past week, a very strange game against York College in which your 3 leading guards, players who play the most minutes, at least handling the basketball, Victoria Diggs, Jasmine Tirado-Viscala, and Megan Kelly all were out of that game. So you had 8 players, all 8 scored. How did those 8 players respond to that adversity on Wednesday night?
They did so well. I am very, very pleased by that. And we talked about that I said in practice after Jasmine went down, if we have 5, we're going, and we're going hard. That's what makes a team, and that's what builds a team when you hit adversity. And they came out with so much fire and so much energy and so much belief in each other. And I think that was just the best thing to take from that game. We go back and we talk about it, and we're like, man, if we had maybe one more person, we got gassed. Mm-hmm. But I'm so proud. I'm so proud of the fight that they gave, and we were in it. We were in it for a very long time. So. And
York College is a legitimately very strong team in conference, mm-hmm. and a very deep team in conference. And does that sort of thing help bring those 8 players together, kind of galvanize the team? And was there anything that was like, oh, this works, we might actually take it from this game and go on with it?
I think the things that we noticed that worked was we knew that we had people other than those 3 guards that could handle the ball and that could score. And everyone scored in that game. And that was something that I talked about after, was when we get these 3 people back, nothing should change. Like, nothing should change. You guys should still go as hard, still want to score just as much. And so that was something that we definitely took from that. And we had people step up tremendously within those last, or that game, and it carried over even to this past weekend. So it was very, very good to see those people step up, and the chemistry that formed, and people were playing out of position. And I had Amanda Emery at the 3 sometimes, and things that were just totally uncomfortable for them, and they did it, and they did it without hesitation. And so that's something that you like to see as a coach.
I want to mention Victoria Yoder and sort of her evolution this season, where she started as a post player, then moved to coming off the bench in a post role. You've sort of had Downey and Jones emerge, and they've got more size. Yoder's kind of evolved into more of a backcourt player, and her free throw rate is very high as a guard. How is she adjusting to that change in role, and how does she help your team from there?
I have to give Yoder, all the credit in the world, because I have bounced her around so much. And when I recruit players like that, I always say, like, I like players that I can throw you anywhere and you're going to rise above. Like, if we get in foul trouble,
she's been everywhere.
Yes. And if we need you to play a guard, I need you to handle the ball. And if we get in foul trouble in the block, I need you to go in the block and bang. And she's like, yep, got it. And that's something that is intangible. She is a workhorse all the time, and she's pretty coachable for the most part. I was I was on her in practice, and she takes things and she applies them, and she's trying to get better in every aspect of her game. And getting to the free throw line, she even missed a few, and she was like, I don't do that. That's not me. I miss too many free throws. And, as a coach, you love to hear that. And the next day in the gym, she was working. So it comes from her work ethic. That's definitely what it stems from, because she is one of the hardest workers on our team.
I want to shift gears to the St. Mary's game, and that game snaps a 3-game losing streak. There was a tough homestand where you have 2 really good teams coming in, and then Southern Virginia, who was hot coming into that game, and now it's snapped against St. Mary's. Kayla Wilson, 18 points, Marina Jones, 10, a career high. I want to talk about Kayla Wilson, who's got 3 straight games in double figures, and we talked mid-January a couple weeks ago about how you wanted her to be more like a sophomore, or essentially she was a sophomore being in her second semester. What has gotten into her, especially this last week and a half?
Well, I talked to her, especially when Diggs went out, and then Megan went out with the flu, and then Jazz went down with an ankle, and I kind of pulled her aside, and I was like, here it goes. Like, I believe in you. I know that you believe in you. We just got to put it all together. And I told her that I was going to help her out. I was going to call plays for her. All I need, like you and me locked in. And she has been for the most part. And she's done a really good job kind of taking that quote-unquote leadership role on the floor that a guard needs to have. She still has a long way to go, and we're still going to develop her. But I'm so, so proud of the way that she's come out in the last 2 games, and especially still at St. Mary's. I mean, Diggs was on short minutes, and she still stepped up and played like Diggs wasn't there. And that's what I told her that I need from her every single night. Handle the ball and make plays and make things happen. And she did that. Her skill level was always there. It was just a matter of finding her time and her place. And here it was, and she took it and she ran with it. So that's, I'm really happy for her.
She had a nice first quarter against St. Mary's. Your team was able to play with a lead pretty much that entire game. Victoria Diggs only 24 minutes. Was it nice to be able to ease Diggs back into the game where she wasn't trying to lead a comeback attempt or trying to do too much? How did she do on Saturday?
Yeah, she did well. I told her I was going to keep her on short minutes to ease her back in. And when you're out for a week, you're winded, and, all of those little things that you haven't ran and worked for a week. But she did well. She worked her way back in. It was nice to be able to do that and work her way back in. But even so, I had all the belief, Kayla's been stepping up huge. So I kind of let Kayla still take the reins and lead our team on Saturday, and she did that.
I also want to mention the team was plus 22 in rebounding. 6 different players have at least 5 rebounds. This team, if it wants to be, can be very big. Are we sort of seeing this team kind of evolve in its identity? At the beginning of the year, it's hitting 8 threes per game,
Yeah.
and then as the months have progressed, that number has kind of gone down. The scoring is kind of balanced out. How is this team evolving throughout the year?
Yeah, I mean, in the beginning, that was our identity. And I knew that wasn't going to last for very long, especially once you get in the conference play. I mean, yes, we're a three-point shooting team, but we're scouted, and teams know that, and our guards were going to get shut down if our post players couldn't score. So we've been working a lot in practice with that, and the development of Marina and Amber has been really great for that, because Amanda and Sid can't do it on their own. And so to have 4 of those post players that to rotate in has been great. And so, yeah, our identity has kind of shifted, but I said even after the St. Mary's game that Kayla and Marina were our 2 leading scorers. And, I mean, that in itself tells you how balanced of a team we are. Like, it's so great that we can come into the locker room and it's a different kid every single night. So as a coach, that's what I want. I want more people. I want a different leading scorer. I want people to step up. And that's what makes us balanced. If they shut someone down, we got someone else. I'm very happy with the progression of our post players. It's really helped us out, and I think it's going to help us out here down the stretch.
Speaking of those post players, that added depth of Downey and Jones coming on looks like it will certainly help against Penn State Harrisburg. They've got some size. They really want to work it inside. They're last in the league, but they do want to get it to their scorers, and they'd love nothing less to hand Frostburg a loss and potentially hurt the playoff chances. What's the attitude of playing a team the second time and the challenge that Penn State Harrisburg presents?
Every CAC team, you got to come in ready. And if we haven't learned that this year, we're in trouble. But Penn State Harrisburg is a scrappy team. I mean, they've taken people down to the wire, and they've fallen short. And they're not a team to take lightly. There is no team in our conference that we can take lightly. So we have to go in and focus on us and keep doing what we're doing. We can't just expect to roll into a gym and not play our best and come out with a win. And that's something that I talked about at St. Mary's too, is I'm going to coach you all the way through no matter what the score is. Like, we have to remain fundamental, and we have to remain, in our game. So that's something that we talked about, but we got to come ready to play on Wednesday, and Harrisburg is a scrappy team. So we'll be ready.
Finally, Salisbury Saturday is an extremely important game in terms of playoff positioning. They're a game up on Frostburg in the standings. Frostburg already has a win over Salisbury. Salisbury did not lose to Southern Virginia the first time around, and then they've beaten Mary Washington. This is an important head-to-head matchup. And you mentioned to me earlier, you don't really need to do a lot to get the team geared up to play against Salisbury in terms of an effort standpoint. More of a tactical coaching standpoint, how do you approach this game?
You approach it almost like any other. Our day before games are very standard. We do the same things. We don't get out of our rhythm no matter who we play. But Salisbury is going to be a big one. And we talked about the remainder of our season after the York game, about how here we go. Like, we got to kick it in gear, and we got to grind it out for these next few games. And Salisbury is definitely one of those on our schedule, and it's at Salisbury. So, I mean, we got to come to play because they're playing really well right now. And it's a team that if we're ready and we're focused, that we can get. But we also can't look past anyone, and we've got to take care of business every single night as it comes. So, got to have a good week of practice here.
Looking forward to this week for this women's team, 5-7 in conference play, 2 big games on the road this week. Coach Saunders, thank you for joining me on the Bobcast.
Thank you.
Up next on the Bobcast, we have men's and women's track and field coach Dale Louie. The track and field teams competed at the Bucknell Open and Multi on Friday and Saturday. ECAC qualifying times and performances: Kayla Truesdell, John Kearns, Robbie Romano, DeJohn Wiseman. Any others that I'm forgetting?
That's about it. Yeah. Destiny Logan. Improved her 400 time there. She already had qualified, but improved the time there too.
Top 10 in the 400 as well. Expectations for this meet at Bucknell, and how did it go?
Pretty well. We little more limited on the field event side who we could enter, so that gets a little bit in the way of trying to develop all of our athletes and things. But the people who went, for the most part, did well. John Kearns actually had a pretty good series in the weight throw.
Mm-hmm.
Kirsten Tawney had a pretty nice throw in the weight throw, kind of getting back to where she was the first meet of the year with that distance. On the running side, some improvements from a number of people. Some of the people you mentioned, already. The competition is always, good.
Yes.
It's hard to figure out who you got coming at you until you show up, in your particular event. So it's a little hard to sometimes, plan like a race strategy and things of that nature.
Sure. When you look at this event, and you mentioned John Kearns, his year continues, and as a sophomore, he's top 50 in the country in the weight throw. He's top 5 in the country in terms of underclassmen. Now, you've coached J.R. Lowry, who had an outstanding career, All-American here. Kearns is another thrower. What's his ceiling? What have you seen out of him, and how has he progressed here at Frostburg?
John is obviously for a big guy, and he is a big guy.
Yes.
Much bigger than J.R. He's also relatively athletic, quite flexible. Those things come into play when you are trying to, be a good athlete in any sport. Some people look at throwers as, well, the bigger they are, the further they throw, which is, absolutely wrong. I mean, and even some of the strongest guys don't throw it very far. So it's a combination of athleticism, strength, and technique. And, John has made some nice progress with the technique. We need to continue to work with his athleticism if he's going to continue to improve. The same with his strength training.
I have a question about, with it being the weight throw, and J.R. Lowry had a good run with the weight throw. He wasn't indoor every single season, but when he did, he was good with the weight throw. How does that translate when we look to the outdoor season, say any of the other throwing events there?
Well, the hammer throw is where that weight translates to. It becomes a much faster event outdoors because you go from a 35-pound indoor weight really to a 16-pound hammer.
Okay.
So a much faster turning. If you can do your footwork, you can do either one. With the weight throw, because it's 35 pounds, more so than with the hammer, the size of the person, probably, it's a plus.
Sure.
If you don't have that size, then you better generate some real speed. And that's a little harder to do, because you're trying to accelerate a 35-pound, implement. And it can be done, but you better, be very athletic and strong enough to handle that speed.
And last thing for Kearns, what would you say his ceiling is? What do you see in his future, or as his potential?
Well, I mean, I think, Coach Kendall there coached him last year. She and I had talked, and early on it was pretty evident that the weight throw in particular was something that he was going to probably be pretty good at. We are not surprised at all that, he's sniffing the school record in that, already. As you mentioned earlier, JR didn't throw it quite as much as John will have that opportunity.
Yes.
But that's, not taking anything away from John. He's the ceiling is going to be what he believes the ceiling is going to be.
Wow.
That's, because right now it's the mental side of approaching training and competition that is the biggest area that he really needs to work with.
Well, we're excited to see how he progresses in that event, especially with CAC Championships sneaking up on us, 2 weeks after this Saturday. I do want to talk about just the nature of this event, this kind of D1 setting with schools all over. What does your team get out of going to a meet and being in a setting like that with the competition that they see?
Well, virtually every flight, every section, has competition. Now Michaela Garrison ran away from some of her competition in her 800, but for the most part, there's somebody to pull you along. It's not they very seldom is there one of those flights or sections that is so weak that you're kind of competing against yourself. So that's the biggest plus, because at this stage of the game we have to be worried about seed performances for the conference championships. We only have one more meet to work with that, so we're really pressed on that side of things. So this meet was good for those people who could get into it.
And with that competition, I saw a clip of Robbie Romano finishing his mile and just grinding it out and getting past a guy, Kayla Truesdell, getting in the finals, finishing second in the 60 meters. In that kind of setting, do you really see who your competitors are, or do they get an even bigger chance to shine?
Well, that's a good point. This is why you go to that kind of competition is to, have people extend themselves. And the athletes at this stage in their career, a number of them still don't quite grasp that is what you need to ultimately get better. It doesn't matter really what sport it's in, but in our sport, it's probably even more true just because of the nature of how we advance to nationals and things of that nature. I mean, it's on you. I mean, there is, seldom is there a teammate that necessarily is going to pull you to a national qualifying performance, because you have to do it. There's no one else that is going to do it. I mean, it's 3 relay teammates, that's the only time there.
Sure. I would recommend that video. It's on our track and field Twitter page where Robbie Romano runs down a guy to finish his mile. That was entertaining for sure.
And that's probably the fastest Robbie's ever run inside for a mile. It's probably the fastest time he's ever run for that distance. We were talking about that after the race. So he's in a nice spot right now, considering that he really has still over a month to go in his indoor season since he's qualified for ECACs.
Yeah, he's doing a really nice job. I want to touch on Dejan Wiseman. He ran the 223.17, which should convert to an ECAC qualifying time. Can you explain that to me?
But several years ago, what the NCAA decided to do was to try to make things fair. They have indexed every track in the country. And the reason for that is bank tracks, if they're properly constructed, for most events, running events will be an advantage over a flat track.
Sure.
And so for years it was whatever you ran, wherever you ran, that was the time you lived with, and advanced to nationals or stayed home. So they have attempted to try to create some fairness, some equity with their indexing.
Wow.
It's probably going to continue to evolve over a period of time. There's room for arguing as to whether or not the indexing is accurate. For example, 2 years ago, Kayla Truesdell at ECACs ran her fastest 200-meter time of the year. But at the Ocean Breeze Staten Island facility, it's a bank track. So when they converted it, she actually ran a slower time than she had earlier in the year on a flat track. And it stood in the way of her having a chance to go to nationals.
Wow.
So this is something that, quite honestly, towards the end of this, as we get towards the end of this season, we're going to have to be looking at with some of our runners, Kayla in particular, because she's ranked in the top runners in the country in 2 events and things, because we want to give her a chance to have that last chance to qualify for nationals, which she did last year at ECAC. So we are at the New York City Armory this year. It is a bank track, and so moving forward, we may have to decide where she's going to, and some other people, actually run just to try to give them the best shot to get to nationals.
Finally, speaking of picking and choosing where you're going, this weekend, athletes are going to both Ursinus and Susquehanna. How does that work?
Most of our team will be going to Susquehanna. They do have some limitations, which really has been hurting our throwing competitors. We've been going to Ursinus for a number of years for the pentathlon. And so we will send Brad Forrester up there for the pentathlon as always. And then we'll fill the van with some other athletes so that they get the chance to compete, because we have people who will be throwing at conference that won't have a chance to compete at Susquehanna. So we've got to try to get them, some marks to help put them in some better flights and things. So we did a little bit of that last year, and we're doing the same thing this year.
Finally, conference championships around the corner. How do you feel your team is in terms of the times and fitness level for this point of the season?
I think fitness-wise, we're getting there. There's two negatives I think I mentioned at one point in the past that we're looking at right now are really going to hurt us. One is that our first meet of the year at WVU, they had a problem with their camera. And so except for 2 running races, all of our times were essentially worthless because they have to be fully automatic timing. So we lost a meet there, and there's been a lot of changes with some schools hosting meets. And so the week before the conference, where we normally have a meet, and that's our final tune-up, right now we cannot find a meet to attend. So essentially we've lost 2 weeks of potential opportunities to qualify. So it's not a good thing.
No.
Really this weekend is the last chance for these people to get into the conference meet, improve their seed place, etc.
Well, CAC championships around the corner this weekend at Susquehanna and Ursinus. Dale Louie, thanks for joining me on the Bobcast.
Thank you very much.